Classic red and black tactical suit. Deadpool's costume made its debut in New Mutants, first series, issue 98, and immediately broke every rule of superhero design conventions in effect at the time. The Marvel Universe in 1991 still ran on primary colors and clear visual branding. The X-Men wore bright yellow and blue, Spider-Man wore red and blue in a clean, recognizable layout, and even anti-heroes kept to readable color logic. Deadpool's first appearance threw all of that out with a pattern so specific and so deliberately geometric that it has outlasted every costume redesign Marvel has attempted in the 30-plus years since. The black portion of the suit runs along the sides of the body, extending up from the thighs, rising along the sides of the chest, and ending at the shoulders. The central red portion has angled cuts and strips taken out of it where the black segments meet. That description sounds clinical, but what it produces is a suit that looks engineered rather than designed, like someone cut two fabrics at 45-degree angles and stitched them together without a plan, when in reality, the pattern is precise and repeatable and identical on every Deadpool appearance across every era of the character's publishing history. The contrast with what superhero costumes look like in 1991 is the point. The X-Men's costumes in that era were bright, unbroken, and symbolic. Spider-Man's suit used red and blue, but in a clean block layout with a single chest emblem. Nobody was doing diagonal panel cuts that split the torso into interlocking zones of competing color. Deadpool's suit looked like it had been assembled from leftover fabric by someone who hated sewing, which was exactly the energy the character was selling: chaotic, improvised, not playing by anyone else's rulebook. The real question is why no one ever normalized it. Characters with radical visual concepts get cleaned up all the time. Spider-Man's suit has been tweaked, reinterpreted, and streamlined by dozens of creative teams across decades. Batman's design drifts subtly with each new era. The Flash's costume gets minor adjustments almost constantly. A pattern as visually aggressive and structurally unusual as Deadpool's should have been smoothed out, simplified, or replaced within a few years. Every other character with a similarly distinctive visual gimmick has seen that gimmick eroded by artists who found it too limiting or too difficult to draw consistently. The pattern survived precisely because it was never meant to be conventional. Deadpool doesn't wear a superhero costume. He wears a specific arrangement of color panels that signals he isn't operating within the standard visual grammar of the Marvel Universe. The black side panels climbing the torso aren't a design flourish, they're a structural declaration that this character exists outside the normal rules. And the reason that has held for over 30 years without a single meaningful redesign is that Marvel learned early that Deadpool's visual identity is the one element of the character that no creative team has ever successfully argued for changing. The suit hasn't been maintained because it's beloved. It's been maintained because it works in a way that nothing else proposed ever has. Subscribe and tell us in the comments which Deadpool suit you think was the most intentional. Let's get back into it. X-Force uniform. The X-Force uniform represents Deadpool's brief but total visual alignment with a militaristic Black Ops team, and it's the most dramatic departure from his classic design that any version of the character has ever undergone. In 2008, Marvel relaunched X-Force as a new series with Wolverine leading a covert strike team designed explicitly to operate outside the public-facing X-Men's philosophy, and Deadpool was given a uniform to match. The February 2008 debut was written by Craig Kyle and Christopher Yost with Clayton Crain as artists, and it ran for exactly 10 months before concluding in September 2010, at which point the series was immediately relaunched as Uncanny X-Force in October 2010 under Rick Remender and Jerome Opeña. The uniform pushed Deadpool's color scheme to its absolute logical extreme. Almost no color visible at all, replaced with a near-total black and white layout matching the X-Force team's visual identity. This wasn't a minor tweak or a temporary storyline costume. It was a full visual rebrand for the duration of the series, and it communicated something that Deadpool's classic suit never had to. He was now an officially sanctioned paramilitary operative, and his visual identity needed to reflect that operational reality rather than his mercenary gag comedy persona. The color block panels had been the character's entire visual vocabulary since issue 98. The black and red split was what made Deadpool readable on a page crowded with other superheroes. Removing the red almost entirely and replacing it with a Black Ops aesthetic was a choice that said the character's priorities had shifted from personal brand to team function. The X-Force uniform was built for missions, not for iconography, and Deadpool wearing it meant he had accepted a role where visibility was a liability rather than a feature. The series ran for 28 issues from February 2008 through September 2010 before concluding, and Uncanny X-Force relaunched the following month under a new creative team. The uniform was discarded almost immediately in that transition, as Deadpool returned to his classic suit, and the X-Force team itself was restructured under Remender's run with a different roster and a different mission focus. The Kyle and Yost X-Force exists as a discrete creative chapter, 10 months of storytelling with a beginning, middle, and end, and the uniform belongs entirely to that chapter, never appearing again as Deadpool's primary outfit. The X-Force uniform is ultimately Deadpool's costume as utilitarian statement. The classic suit says something about who Deadpool is. The X-Force uniform says something about what Deadpool does when he's operating under someone else's authority. Wolverine didn't pick Deadpool for X-Force because of his personality or his mercenary credentials. He picked him because he was lethal, unpredictable, and in a Black Ops context, expendable. The uniform reflected that calculus by stripping away every visual marker of individuality that Deadpool had built over 15 years of comics and replacing it with a design that made him indistinguishable from any other member of the team. The contradiction is that Deadpool has spent his entire publishing history fighting to be visually unique, and the X-Force uniform is the one time he willingly gave that up, because for 10 months, being part of something bigger actually mattered more than standing out. X-uniform. Deadpool didn't stop at wearing the X-Force badge he'd technically earned. He kept pushing for the real thing, and what happened next went further than anyone expected. Beast and Wolverine, apparently running low on better ideas, decided to prank him by dressing him in an actual X-Men uniform, in the team's traditional yellow and black, with X-Men across the chest. It was supposed to be a one-time gag, a Halloween costume nobody would ever forget, and in that respect, it succeeded spectacularly. What nobody counted on was that the joke would plant a seed Deadpool would spend years watering. Being dressed in the X-Men uniform, even as a punchline, kicked off an obsession that wouldn't quit. He didn't wait for an invitation. He didn't fill out an application. Deadpool joined the X-Men and wore a variation of their yellow and black uniform, wearing his standard colored mask the whole time, like the bottom half of the uniform was the only part of him that needed to stay recognizable. Nobody authorized it. The X-Men didn't approve it. Deadpool just kept showing up wearing it until the costume stopped being a prank and started being his, and eventually the roster caught up to what he'd already decided alone. His standard red and black gave way to the yellow and black of the X uniform, with X-Men written across the chest, and when that wasn't enough, he simply built a better version himself out of yellow and blue fabric and a needle. Deadpool 2 gave a loose live-action nod to the lineage when Wade formed his own X-Force team and stepped out with his red suit scorched into darker tones, the bright colors baked out of the fabric by the mission itself, but the comics version was more intentional than Damage could ever make it. That was Deadpool doing the work to belong, stitching his name onto a team that never asked for him until they had no choice but to acknowledge he'd stitched himself there first. Gray stealth suit. Where the X uniform was Deadpool reaching for an identity the X-Men eventually gave him, the gray stealth suit is Wolverine's team refusing to give him one at all. There's no badge, no name, no signature red anywhere, just the same black and gray pattern the entire covert roster wore. Deadpool reduced to another anonymous unit in a mission that required nobody be identifiable. The suit appeared as a Comic-Con exclusive tied directly to Marvel's Uncanny X-Force comics, the 2010 to 2012 storyline where Wolverine assembled a Black Ops branch of the X-Men for missions too dirty for the main team, and the entire roster traded their brighter colors for black and gray stealth uniforms designed purely for concealment. Deadpool's standard red and black tactical suit was set aside, no panels, no white eye patches, no flourishes, and the design held across roughly 2 years of continuous Uncanny X-Force publication, the stealth aesthetic overriding every visual marker that made Deadpool visually distinct from any other soldier on that team. Deadpool 2 referenced the same lineage when Wade's red suit emerged scorched into darker tones after forming his own X-Force unit, but the comics version went further. The suit offered Deadpool no individual identity at all, not even the small courtesy of a color that was his. The X uniform had at least been Deadpool's choice, a costume he'd earned through sheer persistence. The gray stealth suit was assigned to him as equipment, no different from the weapons and gear the rest of the team carried, and Deadpool couldn't personalize it, since the uniform was designed so that no soldier on a covert mission could be individually identified. What the gray stealth suit proves about Deadpool suits as a category is that the label only sticks when Deadpool himself is driving the design. The moment someone else chooses the colors, the suit stops being a Deadpool suit and starts being a uniform he's temporarily wearing, indistinguishable from any other piece of military hardware in the X-Force inventory. Deadpool 2016 film suit. Unlike the gray stealth suit we just covered, a purpose-built variant for a covert mission designed specifically to vanish into shadow, the 2016 film suit is the opposite impulse entirely. This is Deadpool's first proper superhero costume, and it does not want to hide. It lands on screen as an almost one-to-one live-action adaptation of his comic book design, complete with animated white eyes that move with full expressiveness across the entire range of the character's manic energy. The result is a suit that carries the comic book's burgundy red into the cinematic space, though with a deliberate and specific adjustment. The shade used here is darker than the bright red that Deadpool wears in the source comics, a tonal shift that threads the needle between faithful adaptation and grounded cinematic reality. That darker burgundy is not an accident and not a compromise. It is a calculated choice that establishes the visual baseline the entire film franchise would anchor itself to. Making that vision real required actual costuming expertise, not digital shortcuts. The studio called on Russ Shinkle of specialty costume workshop Film Illusions to help take their concept art and turn it into a reality. It started with a 3D laser scan of the actor, capturing the exact contours of his body so the resulting suit would sit correctly on every angle. From that data, Film Illusions produced costumes specifically for the production. 3 suits total, 3 separate fittings, every seam and panel replicated across 3 bodies. That is the kind of logistical commitment that separates a costume from a uniform. The masks themselves were custom built for the demands of the production. The porous panels are the difference between a suit that works for a 2-minute scene and a suit an actor can wear while delivering dialogue, performing stunts, and running through practical effects. The attention to actor comfort set a standard for practical superhero costuming. The design brief pushed even further in the direction of tactile reality. The suit was built to be geared up, layered with real tactical equipment, real pouches, real hardware affixed to every surface, explicitly to keep it grounded in a world where people punch through concrete. Every element was built to look and function as a real piece of tactical gear. The costume was an argument that the absurdity of the character could be made physically present rather than visually referenced. That philosophy, practical construction first, effects second, is what makes this suit feel tangible in a way digital costumes never do. Deadpool 2 film suit. The suit returns for the 2018 sequel wearing the same burgundy red locked in by the first film, no shift, no recalibration, the color is identical to what we just described. The darker shade deliberately chosen over the comic book bright red and never reconsidered between productions. The consistency was absolute and appears to have been intentional from the start. That burgundy red, already darker than the comics, established the franchise's visual baseline. The 2018 suit carries forward the franchise's established red palette. The color marked a deliberate point in the character's visual evolution. Deadpool and Wolverine suit. Deadpool 2's burgundy tactical X-Force aesthetic at least carried the logic of a team uniform, coordinated gear for a coordinated mission. This suit shatters that logic entirely. Hugh Jackman's Wolverine appears in Deadpool and Wolverine wearing his iconic yellow and blue comic-accurate design. A look so fundamental to the character that it served as the default visual across decades of Marvel Comics runs, animated series, and merchandise, yet somehow never made it into any of the prior 20th Century Fox X-Men films. Every live-action appearance before this one placed him in darker, muted tones. Black leather, darker gray leather, brown. The yellow field with blue highlights simply did not exist in that continuity. The film provides an in-universe explanation. Logan reveals this universe's X-Men designed and supplied the suit, handing a visual identity, its first canonical justification in over 2 decades of live-action appearances. The suit carries the weight of a correction that was 2 decades overdue. Across the Fox franchise, the comics design was treated as if it didn't exist, as if the studio was quietly embarrassed by how loudly and primarily it reads against the moody, desaturated palette the films preferred. Watching it finally appear on screen doesn't feel like a costume choice so much as an overdue acknowledgement that the darker suits were a creative cul-de-sac, not a deliberate artistic statement. And the film doesn't just drop the design in, it gives it a backstory, implying the X-Men of this universe built it, which is more canonical care than this specific design has ever received in any live-action context. The implication reframes the entire Fox run. Those muted suits weren't a version of the character, they were a suppression of the version everyone already knew. Kidpool. Now the stakes escalate beyond visual continuity and into something genuinely disturbing. This is a child soldier from an alternate timeline who died in a multiversal war before he ever had a chance to grow up. Kidpool is an alternate universe variant of Wade Wilson from Earth 10330, admitted as the newest boy at the Xavier Orphanage for troubled boys. His conduct disorder made that admission itself a precarious arrangement. He was on the verge of being formally reprimanded for inciting a riot during a spring dance when Deadpool of Earth 616 materialized without warning and recruited him into the Deadpool Corps, affectionately nicknaming him Tito. The costume reflects his circumstances directly, a distressed red and black design with a 2-layered hoodie, red pants with knee pads, and matching sneakers. Orphanage-worn gear repurposed into a fighting uniform, not something fabricated in a lab or selected for visual branding. The default assumption is that Kidpool's design is just a smaller, cuter version of Deadpool's classic suit, a child-playing hero in what amount to hand-me-downs. That assumption gets broken by what actually happened to him. Kidpool made his comic book debut in Prelude to Deadpool Corps in 2010 by Victor Gischler and Whilce Portacio, and even at that school dance, he was already operating within specific X-Men continuity beats, trying to help a young Cyclops get a dance with Jean Grey before starting a fight with Wolverine, moments that slot him into the broader mutant timeline in ways that go well beyond visual design. What kills the hand-me-down theory is the death itself. Kidpool died after touching a dead body rigged with explosives by the evil Deadpool Corps, a version of himself from across the multiverse. The Deadpool Corps recruited a child whose disorder was clearly worsening, sent him into a war between iterations of the same personality, and he became collateral damage to a trap set by the villainous version of his own face. He appears in Deadpool and Wolverine as part of the Deadpool Corps, a character whose story began at a school dance and ended as a casualty of a multiversal conflict no child should have entered at any age. Lady Deadpool, a different kind of person, is wearing Deadpool's name. Wanda Wilson is from Earth 3010. She was a former mercenary and government test subject before any of this started, which means the scars she carries aren't purely a function of the regenerative engine. They predate it, layers of damage accumulated before her body ever learned how to undo it. Lady Deadpool is motivated by money, television, junk food, and sometimes love, and that last one is the detail that actually defines her. The bodyguard job with former actor Charles Randolph wasn't a mercenary assignment, it was a crush. Wanda Wilson protected a man she liked, which is a kind of emotional exposure Wade Wilson never really permits himself, and it grounds this version of the character in a specific kind of longing the original doesn't have a vocabulary for. The healing works the same way it does for Wade, rapid regeneration that makes her virtually immune to poisons, most drugs, and diseases. But here's what that engine costs her. Regenerating brain cells leaves Lady Deadpool's sanity and memories severely damaged. Every time her body repairs itself, something of who she was quietly disappears. The thing that should make her unstoppable is simultaneously unmaking her layer by layer from the inside out, and the damage doesn't show on the skin. She's an extraordinary athlete with peak human strength, speed, and agility, skilled in multiple unarmed combat techniques, an excellent marksman and accomplished user of bladed weapons, almost always wielding a combination of guns and swords. She moves and fights with the full Deadpool toolkit, but the war happening behind her eyes is one nobody else can see. Deadpool 616 recruited her into the Deadpool Corps, the multiversal collective of Deadpools operating across realities, and that's where Tath, the Contemplator, found her. He chose Lady Deadpool specifically to save the universe from awareness, a consciousness-absorbing entity, and that's a scope of mission the Corps rarely handles. This isn't a bodyguard job or a bounty or a punchline. A cosmic entity was eating minds, and the person picked to stop it was the scarred, junk food-consuming, television-watching mercenary from Earth 3010. She apparently slew awareness with her sword. That's the kind of resume line most Deadpool variants never accumulate. And here's where it gets dark. When awareness trapped Lady Deadpool in an illusion, her scars disappeared permanently. She came out of that encounter looking like she'd never been hurt at all, and she concealed it from her scarred core teammates. The woman who'd been heavily scarred since before the regeneration engine turned on suddenly had smooth, unmarked skin, and she chose to hide that from the people fighting alongside her, people who were still visibly carrying their damage. She had something they wanted and couldn't have, and she gave up the chance to be seen whole so they wouldn't feel the loss of their own wounds more acutely. Lady Deadpool apparently slew the cosmic entity, awareness with her sword, and sacrificed herself fighting evil Deadpools. Deadpool 2099 Warda Wilson isn't breaking a rule that already exists, she's showing you the rule was never real to begin with. Deadpool 2099 hails from Earth 16356 and first appeared in Deadpool Merc with a mouth number 7 back in 2009. That's not a random cameo slot. That's an ongoing series, issue 7, meaning Warda Wilson had enough narrative weight to sustain a full story arc by the time she showed up. And Marvel's own multiverse article lists Deadpool 2099 as one of the Deadpool variants featured across the multiverse, which means the company's official organizational system for its own canon treats her as a legitimate, named entry in the Deadpool lineage. What makes that listing significant isn't that Marvel noticed this version, it's that by the time a multiverse article exists with the capacity to catalog variants, the underlying assumption that there is only one canonical Deadpool has already collapsed. The original pitch, the Merc with a mouth, singular, irreplaceable, the one and only, was built on the idea that Wade Wilson was a unique accident of the Weapon X program, a fluke so specific it couldn't happen twice. Warda Wilson and Earth 16356 aren't the exception that proves the rule. They're proof the rule never applied. The moment Marvel created a structure capable of containing her, the structure stopped being a way of organizing Deadpool variants and started being a map of how many of them actually exist. Every named entry in that article is a small, quiet refutation of the premise that there was ever only one. Dogpool. A different kind of creature is wearing Deadpool's name. Dogpool first appeared in Prelude to Deadpool Corpse number 3 in March 2010. Dogpool was created by Victor Gischler and Philip Bond, and Dogpool is from Earth 103173 in the Marvel Multiverse. Dogpool gained regenerative powers after being subjected to animal testing by a cosmetics company called Babeline in a project called Mascara-X, which is exactly the kind of deadpan cruelty that fits the Deadpool mythos. The healing factor wasn't a blessing here, it was a product development pipeline gone wrong. After escaping experimentation, Dogpool performed death-defying tricks in a circus and adopted the name Deadpool. Deadpool of Earth 616 rescued Dogpool, who joined the Deadpool Corps. Dogpool became close friends with Kidpool and was eventually killed by an evil alternate universe Deadpool. Dogpool made his final comic appearance in Deadpool Kills Deadpool number 1 in 2013, where Dogpool was killed. At 2024 San Diego Comic-Con, Marvel announced a new Dogpool comic series by Mackenzie Cadenhead and Enid Balam featuring Catpool and Mousepool, a creative team and companion characters that signal the character has outlasted its original run and earned a second life. A female incarnation of Dogpool appears in Deadpool and Wolverine, portrayed by dog actress Peggy, who won the UK's Ugliest Dog competition before being cast as Dogpool. Reynolds praised Peggy as an incredible co-star and a real testament. That's not a throwaway compliment about a dog's face. That's what happens when the suit isn't fabric at all, when the thing wearing the name is alive, unscripted, and nothing close to tactical. The Deadpool suit was always sold as a costume, a piece of equipment Wade Wilson put on, but the deepest truth of the entire franchise was sitting in front of the camera the whole time. The only honest answer the suit ever had was that the name was never the point. The person underneath, however mangled, was